Origin of language. In 1786, scholar Sir William Jones, a British judge who lived in India, first suggested the possibility of Indo-European civilization and initiated the Indo-European theory, which rests on the fact that various languages from all across Eurasia in lands as far apart as India and Iceland show so many essential similarities that they must have originated as a single tongue at some point long ago. This theory suggests that there must once have been a mother tongue which, as the peoples who spoke it spread across the globe, evolved into a family of daughter languages, all of which are fundamentally related, though looking at the differences on the surface. Since these languages can be found all over Europe and Asia, scholars ultimately settled on the term Indo-European for this culture, and Proto-Indo-European as the designation for the mother tongue itself. The evolution of Indo-European into many branches has a lot to do with the migration of the ancient Indo-Europeans. In late prehistory, waves of Indo-Europeans began migrating in several directions across the Eurasian continent, displacing natives and even other Indo-European settlers who had entered an area earlier. Scholars debate when exactly these massive migrations began, and hence when the Proto-Indo-European broke apart. Some say as early as 8000 to 5000 BC, while others put it fairly late, after 3000 BC, but it's clear that by the third millennium the Indo-Europeans were on the move, as well as the language split. The question whether the Indo-Europeans lived is no less difficult. The Indo-Europeans were in all likelihood a nomadic people, which means that while they may have had a home range, it's possible they had no specific homeland, and that these nomads may have left behind few traces archaeologically, at least compared to settled folk. Tantalizing hints, however, emerge from the data. For example, the patterns of dispersion among languages should after all furnish some sort of indication as to the migrational paths followed by the Indo-Europeans, and, when traced backwards, ought to provide at least a general indication of their place of origin. Moreover, similarities and differences in the daughter languages should also help point out how this dispersion proceeded, or at least where groups were at different times. But unfortunately, there are too many variables at work, and no consensus has emerged among scholars about the original site. In the end, it seems safe to say only that the Indo-Europeans probably lived in or around the steppes of southern Russia at some point, simply because that area is central in the vast territory their descendants would later come to occupy. Over the past 200 years, linguists have attempted to reconstruct the vocabulary and syntax of the postulated Proto-Indo-European language. However, the whole process is difficult since it requires a large vocabulary in all the languages being compared in order to find enough cognates, words in two or more daughter languages that derive from the same word in the ancestral language, and also requires a deep knowledge of the grammar of each of the languages in order to see cognate relationships that might be obscured by morphology and contextual phonological change, and not be fooled into seeing false cognates where morphology or phonology may create chance similarities. Living languages can be compared directly with one another. while dead languages that have survived in written form can usually be vocalized by inference from internal linguistic evidence. To establish relationships among these languages is relatively easy. For instance, evidence abound that Italian is a descendant of Latin, a language that was spoken in Italy 2,000 years ago and one which left a great number of written documents. The Roman conquest helped spread Latin throughout Europe, where it eventually developed into regional dialects. When the Roman Empire broke up, these regional dialects evolved into the modern Romance languages that we know today: French, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, and others. Dead languages that have never been written, however, can be reconstructed only by comparing their descendants and by working backward according to the laws that govern phonological change, which are more stable over the centuries than our meanings and hence are all important to historical linguists.